The great meeting hall of Station Prime floated in the darkness of space, a crystal structure that caught starlight from 3 different suns. Inside, beings from 12 different worlds gathered around a massive circular table. Each species had traveled thousands of light years to be here for the centennial meeting of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Crickstall adjusted his forearms nervously as he took his seat. The Vorthan Empire had sent him to represent their interests, but today felt different. Something hung in the air, a tension that even the most experienced diplomats could feel. High Chancellor Zelok, ancient even by his long-lived species standards, called the meeting to order with a sound like wind chimes. For 3,000 years, stories had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species had their own version, but they all talked about the same thing. Humans. Beings from a world called Terra, somewhere in the unexplored regions of space. The stories said these creatures walked on 2 legs, had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities that anyone could understand. Yet the legends claimed they were the most dangerous species in the universe. The tales seemed impossible. How could a species with such short lives, barely 100 rotations of their star, achieve anything meaningful? How could beings so fragile that a simple fall could kill them ever leave their planet? The Thraxians, with their stone-like skin, laughed at the idea. The Zalathi, who could survive in the vacuum of space for hours, found it ridiculous. Commander Vexhar of the Zalathi Defense Force had spent 40 years studying these stories. She had traveled to dead systems, searching through ancient ruins and derelict stations. She had found things that made her scales change color with excitement. Probe fragments with strange markings, mathematical equations that suggested a completely different understanding of physics, images carved into metal showing bipedal figures, with flat faces and 5-fingered hands. She remembered the day she found the most complete probe, drifting in the void between stars. It was old, maybe 500 years, but still transmitting a weak signal. The message it carried had taken her team months to decode. It contained music, mathematical constants, and images of a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. The star, charts pointed to a region of space that everyone avoided, where ships disappeared and never returned. Most scientists dismissed her findings. Professor Gorthak of the Zarian hegemony had publicly called her research a waste of resources. He argued that the probes were probably fake, created by some extinct civilization as a joke or a warning. No species matching the human description could possibly survive, let alone thrive enough to send probes across the galaxy. But the stories persisted. Merchants whispered about ghost ships seen at the edge of known space. Explorers reported finding structures on dead worlds that didn't match any known architectural style. Some claimed to have picked up transmissions in an unknown language, broadcasts that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. In the meeting hall, the council members discussed trade agreements and border disputes. The Yutani representative, a peaceful being covered in soft fur, proposed new agricultural exchanges. The Zarian War Master demanded more territory for military exercises. It was all routine, the same arguments they had been having for centuries. Young Yrel sat at her monitoring, station 3 levels below the main hall. She had only been working at Station Prime for 2 rotations, but she took her job seriously. Her 6 eyes scanned multiple screens, watching the long-range sensors that protected the station from any threats. The job was usually boring. Pirates never came this close to the center of council space, and the member species all respected the neutral zone around the station. The first anomaly appeared as just a flicker on her screen, a gravitational distortion at the very edge of sensor range. She adjusted the settings, thinking it was probably just a large asteroid or a sensor malfunction. But then another appeared. And another. Within minutes, she was tracking 47 distinct anomalies, all moving in perfect formation. Her training told her to run a diagnostic first. Equipment failed all the time in space. She ran 3 separate scans, each one confirming what she was seeing. The objects were moving faster than anything should be able to move in normal space. But they weren't using hyperlanes. The energy signatures didn't match any known drive technology. Yrel's supervisor, an older Thraxian named Kronks, barely looked up when she reported the findings. He had seen hundreds of false alarms in his career. Sensor ghosts, he called them. Space was full of strange phenomena that could trick even the best equipment. He told her to log it and continue monitoring, but not to bother the council with ghost stories. Above them, Commander Vexhar was presenting her latest findings to a small group of military officials. She had discovered something new in the probe. Data. Something that had been hidden in the background radiation of the images. When enhanced and processed, the images showed not just one world, but three. The humans had colonized other planets in their system. They had been spacefaring for longer than anyone had imagined. The Vorthon admiral listened with interest, but even he seemed skeptical. If these humans were real and had such advanced technology, why hadn't they made contact? Why hide in the shadows for so long? Vexhar didn't have answers to these questions. She only knew that something was out there, watching and waiting. As the council session continued, more anomalies appeared on Ural's screens. They were closer now, close enough that the automatic defense systems should have been responding, but the objects weren't triggering any alarms. It was as if they existed outside the normal laws of physics that all council technology was based on. The young technician made a decision that would change history. She bypassed her supervisor and sent an emergency alert directly to the council chamber. The message was simple but urgent. Unknown objects approaching Station Prime, 47 contacts. Technology unknown. Intention unknown. The council chamber erupted in confusion. High Chancellor Zelok called for order as military advisors rushed to their stations. On the main display, the sensor data appeared, showing the formation of unknown vessels. They were still too far away for visual confirmation, but their approach was steady and purposeful. Commander Vexhar felt her hearts beat faster. She recognized something in the formation pattern. It matched drawings she had found in ruins on a dead world, formations that some extinct species had carved in stone as a warning or a prophecy. The humans were no longer legends. They were here. The entire station held its breath as the mysterious fleet continued its approach. 3,000 years of stories, myths, and legends were about to become reality. The galaxy would never be the same again. 3 days had passed since the sensor anomalies first appeared. The entire Galactic Council remained in emergency session, something that hadn't happened in over 200 years. Every available ship from the member species had been called to Station Prime. The defensive fleet now numbered over 300 vessels, the largest gathering of military power in Council history. The unknown ships had stopped at the edge of the Kepler defense perimeter, holding position in perfect formation. They made no aggressive moves, sent no communications, just waited. The tension was unbearable. Some council members wanted to attack first. Others counseled patience. Nobody could agree on anything except that these ships represented something, completely outside their experience. Then, without warning, space itself seemed to tear open. The 47 vessels materialized fully, dropping out of what the sensors could only describe as folded space. The emergence sent ripples through every detection grid in 3 sectors. Ships throughout the defensive fleet rocked from gravitational waves that shouldn't exist. Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the alien armada scramble to respond. The human flagship was larger than most Council vessels, built for long-duration missions and equipped with technology that had taken humanity 2 centuries to perfect. Beside him, Commander Lisa Chen studied the tactical displays, noting the positions and apparent capabilities of each alien ship. Lieutenant Commander Paul Rodriguez coordinated with the rest of the human fleet, ensuring all ships maintained defensive positions. They had trained for this moment for decades, running thousands of simulations, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of facing hundreds of alien vessels, each representing a civilization that had been traveling the stars while humans were still learning to use fire. Jack remembered the day Earth's deep space monitors had detected the first alien transmissions. He had been a child then, but the memory was crystal clear. The world had changed overnight. Religions had to reconsider their teachings. Governments had to work together for the first time in history. Humanity had united under a single purpose: to be ready when the time came to join the galactic community. The preparation had been long and careful. Earth's best scientists had studied every scrap of alien technology they could find. They had reverse-engineered crashed probes, decoded transmissions, and slowly built an understanding of galactic civilization. They learned about the Council, about the different species, about the wars and alliances that shaped interstellar politics. Most importantly, they had learned that the galaxy feared them. The stories and legends about humans had spread far and wide, growing more exaggerated with each telling. Some species thought humans were demons, others believed they were gods. The truth, as Jack knew, was much simpler. Humans were survivors, who had learned to work together. On every communication frequency, in every known language of the Council species, the human fleet began broadcasting. The message had been carefully crafted by Earth's best diplomats and linguists. It was simple, direct, and impossible to misinterpret. The words echoed through Station Prime and every ship in the defensive fleet. Greetings to the Galactic Council. We are humanity, representatives of the United Earth Coalition and her colonies. We come in peace, seeking dialogue and mutual understanding. We request permission to send a diplomatic envoy to Station Prime. Please respond. In the council chamber, Ambassador Crixtall nearly collapsed. His forearms shook as the universal translator confirmed what his auditory organs were detecting. The accent patterns, the syntax structure, even the mathematical harmonics of the transmission matched the ancient probe recordings perfectly. The myths were real. The humans were real. And they had somehow traveled thousands of light years without using any known hyperlane. High Chancellor Zelok called for order as the chamber erupted in dozens of different languages. The Thraxians demanded immediate military action. The Yutani pleaded for peaceful contact. The Zerions insisted this was some kind of trick. Through it all, Commander Vexhar stood silent, her scales shifting through colors of vindication and fear. Captain Amy Foster commanded the lead diplomatic vessel, a specially modified cruiser designed to appear non-threatening while still being capable of defending itself. Her crew had been carefully selected from Earth's finest. Dr. Carl Washington, the xenobiologist who had spent 30 years preparing for this moment, checked his equipment one more time. Ambassador Nicole Gray reviewed her notes on Council protocols, having learned 17 different alien languages in preparation. The Vorthan Fleet commander, a war veteran named Tarkus, didn't trust these newcomers. In his experience, any species that appeared peaceful was hiding something. He ordered a warning shot across the bow of the nearest human vessel, a standard challenge in Vorthan military tradition. The plasma bolt streaked through space, designed to pass within 100 meters of the human ship. What happened next would be remembered and studied for generations. The human vessel's point defense systems activated instantly. Laser arrays that were invisible to Council sensors vaporized the plasma bolt in microseconds. The precision was impossible. The reaction time beyond anything the Council had seen. But the humans didn't return fire. They didn't even raise shields or power weapons. Instead, Admiral Morrison broadcast a single word that would become famous throughout the galaxy. Please. That one word, spoken in a tone that somehow conveyed strength and vulnerability simultaneously, changed everything. The Vorthan commander, who had fought in a dozen wars, found himself issuing a stand-down order. He couldn't explain why, but something about these humans made him want to listen. The Council voted to allow a single human ship to approach Station Prime. The journey from the defense perimeter to the station usually took 6 hours at standard speed. The human diplomatic vessel made it in 30 minutes, using short bursts of their folded space technology. Each jump was perfectly calculated to avoid threatening any defensive positions, while demonstrating capabilities that made conventional warfare obsolete. As the human ship docked, thousands of beings crowded the observation decks. Security forces from every member species formed a protective corridor, weapons ready but not aimed. Nobody knew what to expect. The stories had described humans as everything from shapeshifters to energy beings. The reality was somehow both disappointing and terrifying. 5 figures walked down the ramp. They were smaller than most Council species, standing barely 2 meters tall. They wore simple blue uniforms with no armor or visible weapons. They walked on two legs with an easy grace that suggested perfect balance. Their faces were flat and expressive, with two forward-facing eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Ambassador Nicole Gray stepped forward, her hands held open at her sides. When she spoke, her voice carried across the docking bay without amplification. She thanked the Council for allowing this meeting and expressed humanity's hope for peaceful relations. She spoke briefly about Earth, about humanity's long journey to the stars, and about their desire to join the galactic community. But it was the small gestures that really caught attention. The way the humans nodded respectfully to each species, they passed. The way Dr. Washington smiled when a curious Yutani child peeked out from behind its parent. The way Captain Foster automatically steadied an elderly Thraxian who stumbled on the dock plating. These beings who had traveled impossible distances, who possessed technology that defied understanding, who had appeared from nowhere with a fleet that could probably destroy Station Prime, were being helpful. They were being kind. They were being exactly what their legends had said was impossible. Dangerous creatures who chose not to be dangerous. The council chamber had been reconfigured for this historic meeting. Every member species had sent additional representatives. The air was thick with tension and a dozen different atmospheric mixtures as each species tried to maintain comfort while sharing space. The humans, everyone noticed, seemed perfectly comfortable breathing the standard mixture without any assistance. As Ambassador Gray began humanity's formal presentation to the Council, ships throughout the defensive fleet reported something unusual. The human vessels were transmitting technical data, freely sharing information about their propulsion systems, their defensive capabilities, and their peaceful intentions. It was an unprecedented gesture of trust, or perhaps confidence. Either way, it made one thing very clear. Humanity had arrived and the galaxy would never be the same. The council chamber fell completely silent as Ambassador Nicole Gray began her presentation. Every eye, sensor, and recording device focused on the 5 humans standing before them. The weight of 3,000 years of legends pressed down on the moment. Everyone wanted to know if the stories were true, and if so, what that meant for the galaxy. Nicole spoke clearly and slowly, allowing the universal translators time to process her words accurately. She told them about Earth, a small, blue-green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. She described how humanity had evolved on a planet that seemed designed to kill them. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, and climate extremes that would devastate most council species were just everyday challenges for humans. She explained how this harsh environment had shaped them. Humans had learned to work together because, alone, they died. They had developed tools because they lacked natural weapons. They had created medicine because their bodies were fragile. They had built civilizations because cooperation meant survival. Every weakness had driven them to find a solution, and every solution had made them stronger. Dr. Carl Washington took over the presentation, displaying holographic images that made several council members gasp. The first image showed Earth from space, beautiful and blue, covered in clouds and water. The second showed Mars, red and barren, but dotted with dome cities. The third showed Europa, Jupiter's moon, where humans had built settlements beneath the ice. He explained how humanity had discovered they weren't alone 200 years ago. An ancient monitoring station hidden in the asteroid belt had activated when human technology reached a certain level. The station contained information about the Galactic Council, about the various species, and about the hyperlane network that connected civilized space. But it also contained warnings about humanity itself, stories and legends that had somehow spread across the galaxy before humans had even achieved spaceflight. The revelation stunned the Council. Someone or something had been watching Earth, recording human development and spreading stories about them throughout the galaxy. The humans didn't know who or why, but they had spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment, developing their technology in secret, learning about galactic civilization from hidden observation posts. Lieutenant Danny Brooks demonstrated human adaptability without meaning to. A Thraxian child, curious and unafraid, had wandered into the chamber during the presentation. The child's crystalline parent moved to retrieve it, but security forces from 6 different species reached for weapons, trained to see any unexpected movement as a threat. The tension in the room spiked instantly. Danny simply knelt down, moving, slowly and deliberately. He smiled at the child and pulled something from his pocket. His fingers moved quickly, folding a piece of paper into the shape of a bird. He held out the origami crane to the child, who trilled with delight and accepted the gift. The entire room watched as the human soldier, who could have been seen as a threat, became a friend to a child of a species he had never met before. The Thraxian parent, instead of recoiling in fear, found themselves moving closer. Danny showed them how to fold paper, his hands guiding their crystalline appendages through the movements. Within minutes, parent and child were both making paper birds, while the entire Galactic Council watched in amazement. Commander Lisa Chen presented the military briefing, though she emphasized repeatedly that humanity sought peace, not war. She explained human military doctrine, developed through thousands of years of conflict among themselves. Humans had perfected every form of warfare imaginable, from individual combat to weapons that could destroy planets. But they had also learned the cost of war, measured in lives and suffering. She showed them recordings of human history, carefully selected to demonstrate both capability and restraint. The world wars that had nearly destroyed Earth, the nuclear weapons that could end all life, built but never used again after humanity saw their horror. The unity that had emerged when humans realized they might not be alone in the universe. The human fleet, she explained, wasn't built for conquest. It was built for protection. Each ship was designed to defend, to evacuate, to provide aid. Yes, they were armed, but their primary purpose was to help. The weapons were just tools to ensure they could help even when others might try to stop. Them Captain Amy Foster described human exploration methods. While the Council species used hyperlanes, ancient corridors through space that connected star systems, humans had developed something different. They had learned to fold space itself, creating temporary wormholes that allowed instant travel between any 2 points. The technology was energy-intensive and required precise calculations, but it meant humans weren't limited by the existing hyperlane network. This revelation caused an uproar. The hyperlanes had shaped galactic civilization for millennia. Wars were fought over hyperlane junctions. Trade routes followed hyperlane paths. Entire species were isolated because they lacked access to hyperlanes. If humans could travel anywhere instantly, it changed everything. Ambassador Gray raised her hand for silence. She assured the Council that humanity had no intention of disrupting existing power structures or trade agreements. They wanted to share their technology, to help connect isolated species, to open new paths for exploration and trade. But they would do so carefully, with the Council's guidance and approval. The questions came rapidly after that. The Yutani wanted to know about human agriculture and whether they could help with food production. The Zalathi asked about human medicine and their ability to adapt to different environments. The Vorthans inquired about military alliances and defensive pacts. Each species saw opportunities in humanity's arrival, but also threats to their established positions. Dr. Washington answered questions about human biology that fascinated and horrified the Council in equal measure. Humans could eat almost anything organic, their digestive systems capable of breaking down toxins that would kill other species. They could survive injuries that would be fatal to most, their bodies capable of healing from tremendous trauma. They could adapt to different gravities, atmospheres, and radiation levels that would require extensive genetic modification for other species. But it was the psychological traits that truly set humans apart. They could form emotional bonds with any sentient being, finding common ground with species that looked nothing like them. They experienced something called empathy, the ability to feel what others felt, to understand pain and joy across species. Barriers. They had imagination that let them solve problems by thinking of things that had never existed before. A Zerion scientist asked about human lifespan, noting the legends claimed they lived for only 100 rotations. Nicole confirmed this was true but explained that humans viewed their short lives differently. They didn't see it as a limitation, but as motivation. Knowing their time was limited made every moment precious, every achievement meaningful, every Relationship valuable. The presentation continued for hours, each revelation adding to the Council's understanding of these impossible beings. Humans were fragile but resilient, short-lived but ambitious, violent but compassionate, individual but collective. They were walking contradictions that somehow worked. As the formal presentation ended, something unexpected happened. The humans asked questions of their own. They wanted to know about each species, their histories, their cultures, their dreams. They showed genuine interest in art forms they couldn't perceive, in philosophies based on completely different worldviews, in problems they had never faced. Dr. Washington excitedly discussed biology with Zalathi scientists. Captain Foster compared navigation techniques with Vorthan pilots. Lieutenant Brooks somehow started a game with several alien children who had been brought to witness history. Ambassador Gray listened intently to the concerns of smaller species who feared being overlooked in this new age. The council members began to understand something profound. The humans weren't here to dominate or to claim their place through force. They were here to join, to contribute, to be part of something larger. Their power came not from their technology or their adaptability, but from their ability to see potential friends where others saw only strangers. As the day ended and discussions moved to smaller groups, Commander Vexhar approached Ambassador Gray. She had spent decades studying humanity, preparing for this moment. She asked the question that had haunted her research. Why now? Why reveal themselves after centuries of hiding? Nicole's answer was simple, but profound. Humanity had been waiting until they were ready, not militarily but culturally. They needed to be united as a species, to have overcome their own prejudices and conflicts. They needed to be certain they could join the galaxy as helpers, not conquerors. They had been testing themselves, and finally they believed they were ready. The galaxy had discovered that humans were real, and they were everything the legends claimed and more. High War Master Gorthak of the Xerion hegemony stood before the assembled council, his massive frame radiating displeasure. The Xerions had dominated military technology and strategy for over 1,000 years. Their dreadnoughts were the most feared ships in known space. Their warriors were legendary for their skill and ruthlessness. The arrival of humanity threatened everything they had built. Gorthak's voice boomed through the chamber as he made his challenge. Words were meaningless, he declared. Demonstrations in controlled environments proved nothing. If humans were truly the warriors of legend, if their technology was as advanced as they claimed, then surely a single human ship could defend against a full Xerion battle group. He proposed a test, a military exercise that would prove once and for all whether humans deserved the respect they were being given. The council erupted in debate. Some saw it as a reasonable request, a way to verify human capabilities without actual warfare. Others recognized it as an attempt to humiliate the newcomers, to put them in their place before they could upset the existing balance of power. The Yutani representative pleaded for a peaceful alternative, but their voice was drowned out by those eager to see the demonstration. Admiral Jack Morrison consulted with his command staff through their neural links, a technology they hadn't revealed to the council yet. The discussion took only seconds in real time but covered every angle of the situation. They recognized the trap, but also the opportunity. Refusing would be seen as weakness. Accepting might lead to unnecessary conflict. But there was a third option. Captain Eric Johnson volunteered immediately. His ship, the USS Phoenix, was a modest cruiser by human standards, designed for long-range patrol and emergency response. It carried a crew of 300, small compared to the 1,000-plus crews of Xerion dreadnoughts. But Eric had something the Xerions didn't understand yet. He had trained in the asteroid fields of Sol, where space combat was three-dimensional, chess played at relativistic speeds. The rules of engagement were established carefully. The test would use depleted energy weapons and training munitions, designed to register hits without causing actual damage. Safety protocols would be in place, with medical ships from multiple species standing by. The test zone was cleared of all civilian traffic, a sphere of space 50,000 kilometers in diameter. 6 Xerion dreadnoughts moved into position, each one larger than the Phoenix, bristling with weapons that had conquered entire systems. Their crews were veterans of real combat, not simulations. They formed a perfect sphere around the human ship, a formation that had never been defeated in Xerion military history. The observation fleet watched from safe distances, every sensor focused on the test zone. On Station Prime, the Council and thousands of others watched through live feeds. The betting pools, though officially discouraged, heavily favored the Xerions. How could one ship, however advanced, stand against 6 of the galaxy's most powerful warships? Captain Johnson stood on his bridge, calm and focused. His crew worked with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role perfectly. They had run similar scenarios thousands of times, though never against actual alien warships. The key wasn't to fight the way the Xerions expected. It was to change the rules of the game entirely. The signal to begin came from High Chancellor Zelok himself. The Xerion dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously, hundreds of depleted energy beams converging on the Phoenix's position. But the human ship wasn't there anymore. It had folded space, appearing behind one of the dreadnoughts before their targeting. Systems could adjust. The Phoenix's electronic warfare suite activated, flooding the battle zone with false signals and sensor ghosts. Suddenly, the Xerion system showed dozens of human ships, each one indistinguishable from the real Phoenix. Their targeting computers, designed to track objects moving through normal space, couldn't process enemies that teleported instantly between positions. Captain Johnson never fired a single offensive weapon. Instead, he used precision strikes from the Phoenix's point defense systems to disable specific components on the Xerion ships. A laser here to blind a sensor array. A small kinetic projectile there to jam a turret rotation mechanism. Each strike was calculated to disable without destroying, to demonstrate superiority without humiliation. The battle lasted 12 minutes. When it ended, all 6 Xerion dreadnoughts were effectively helpless, drifting in space with their engines disabled, their weapons offline, their communications jammed. The Phoenix hadn't taken a single hit. More importantly, not a single Xerion had been injured. The precision required for such an outcome was beyond anything the Council had imagined possible. High Warmaster Gorthak stood in stunned silence as the data was analyzed. The human ship had made over 300 microjumps through folded space, each one perfectly calculated. It had predicted Xerion tactics with uncanny accuracy. It had shown mercy when it could have shown dominance. The message was clear. Humans didn't need to destroy their enemies. They could simply make them irrelevant. But before the Council could fully process this demonstration, an emergency signal reached Station Prime, a mining colony on the edge of Council space home to 3 million Yutani colonists was under attack. The Devourers had come. The Devourers were the galaxy's nightmare, a nomadic species that traveled in massive swarms, stripping entire worlds of all resources. They consumed everything, leaving only dead rocks in their wake. They couldn't be negotiated with, couldn't be reasoned with. They were a force of nature, like a plague of locusts on a galactic scale. The colony was too far away for Council forces to reach in time. Using the hyperlane network, the fastest ships would take 3 weeks to arrive. By then, there would be nothing left but empty buildings and bones. The Yutani elder on the Council wept openly, knowing his people were doomed. Admiral Morrison didn't hesitate. He ordered the entire human fleet to respond. 47 ships began calculating jump coordinates, their computers working together to plot a course through folded space. It was dangerous jumping such distances without proper reconnaissance, but there wasn't time for caution. Captain Amy Foster led the first wave, her ship emerging from folded space directly above the colony. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Devourer harvester ships, each one the size of a city, were already descending through the atmosphere. Smaller attack craft swarmed like angry insects, destroying any attempts at evacuation or defense. The colonists had already given up hope. The Yutani were pacifists by nature, their world having evolved without predators. They had no weapons, no military tradition. They were gathered in their temples, singing their death songs, preparing for the end with dignity and acceptance. Commander Katie Miller coordinated the evacuation effort. Human dropships designed for exactly this purpose began landing throughout the colony. Human Marines trained to protect rather than conquer spread out to gather survivors. They didn't care that the Yutani looked nothing like humans with their fur-covered bodies and multiple eyes. They saw frightened people who needed help. Captain Luis Garcia's squadron engaged the Devourer swarm, buying time for the evacuation. The battle was fierce and chaotic. The Devourers fought without strategy or tactics, simply throwing numbers at any threat. For every ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. But humans had fought swarms before, in their own history, against locust plagues and in space against asteroid fields. Private Scott Taylor died saving a Yutani nursery, holding off a Devourer boarding party while 60 children escaped. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez gave her life protecting a transport full of evacuees, her fighter taking hits meant for the defenseless ship. Commander Robert Kim's entire crew volunteered to stay behind and keep their damaged ship's weapons firing, covering the retreat of the last evacuation vessels. Through it all, the human medics worked miracles. They treated wounded Yutani despite having no training in their physiology, using scanners and intuition to save lives. Human engineers risked everything to save Yutani cultural artifacts, understanding that some things were worth more than individual lives. Human soldiers carried Yutani children to safety, singing strange Earth songs to keep them calm. The evacuation was a success, but at a cost. 3 human ships were destroyed, their crews sacrificing themselves to save strangers. Over 100 humans died on the ground, each one dying to protect someone they had never met before. The Devourer fleet, reduced by 60%, finally retreated to find easier prey. On the evacuation ships, Yutani survivors couldn't understand what had happened. They had been ready to die, had accepted their fate. Then these strangers from nowhere had appeared, fighting and dying to save them. The Yutani elder asked Admiral Morrison the question that would echo through history. Why did you do this? Why sacrifice your people for ours? Jack Morrison's answer became legend throughout the galaxy. Because we could, because you needed help, and we were able to provide it. Because that's what humans do. We see someone in trouble and we help. It doesn't matter if they're our species or another. It doesn't matter if we've known them for years or just met them. When someone needs help, humans help. The recordings of the evacuation spread throughout Council space within days. The image of human Marines carrying Yutani children while under fire, of human medics treaty. 6 months had passed since humanity's dramatic arrival, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Station Prime, once a place of rigid formality and ancient protocols, now buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt in centuries. Humans were everywhere, not as conquerors or overlords but as friends, teachers, and eager students. The medical wing of Station Prime had been transformed by Dr. Jennifer Cole and her team. Working alongside Zalathi healers and Yutani biochemists, they had developed treatments for diseases that had plagued some species for millennia. The humans brought something unique to medicine, not just their technology but their approach. They saw each patient as an individual, not just a member of a species, and treated mental health with the same importance as physical health. The breakthrough came when Dr. Cole discovered that human antibodies could be modified to work in other species. The process was complex and required careful calibration for each individual, but it opened possibilities that had never existed before. Diseases that had kept entire species confined to their homeworlds could now be treated. The Thraxians, whose crystalline bodies had made them vulnerable to certain radiations, could now explore regions of space that had been deadly to them. But medicine wasn't the only field being revolutionized. Captain Ben Harris had established the first interspecies trade cooperative, bringing together merchants from every council race. His approach was simple but revolutionary. Instead of competing, they would collaborate. Human cargo ships, with Owamdi, their folded space drives, could deliver goods in hours instead of weeks. But they didn't monopolize this advantage. They taught others how to use the technology, sharing it freely. The economic impact was immediate and profound. Worlds that had been isolated by their distance from hyperlanes suddenly had access to galactic markets. The Kralith colonies, which had survived on subsistence farming for centuries, could now export their unique crops to eager buyers across the galaxy. The Vorthan manufacturing centers could receive raw materials from anywhere, making their production more efficient and less expensive. Chef Tony Martin's restaurant on Station Prime had become more than just a place to eat. It was a cultural exchange center where species learned about each other through food. Tony had spent weeks learning what each species could safely consume, then found ways to create dishes that multiple species could share. His greatest triumph was the Unity Feast, a meal where every dish could be enjoyed by at least 3 different species. The restaurant was always crowded, filled with sounds of conversation in dozens of languages. Former enemies sat at the same tables, sharing meals and stories. A Zerion warrior and a Yutani poet discovered they both enjoyed the same fermented grain dish. A Zalathi scientist and a human engineer bonded over their mutual love of spicy foods. Food became a bridge between cultures that had been separated by fear and misunderstanding for millennia. Private Rita Adams had started something unexpected. A Marine with no formal diplomatic training, she had begun writing poetry during the long watches on her ship. When a Thraxian scholar discovered her work, he was amazed to find that the emotional concepts translated perfectly into his species' crystalline harmonics. Rita's simple poems about home, family, and hope resonated across species barriers. Within months, the interspecies poetry exchange had thousands of members. Beings who had never thought they could understand each other's art found common ground in rhythm and meaning. The Vorthans, a warrior culture, discovered they loved human haiku about nature. Humans were fascinated by Yutani dream songs that painted pictures with sound. Art became another universal language. The exploration missions led by Captain Sam Wright pushed the boundaries of known space. Human and alien crews worked together, combining human intuition with alien expertise. They discovered 12 habitable worlds in regions previously thought empty. They found ruins of ancient civilizations that predated the Council by millions of years. They made first contact with 3 new species, each one greeted with the same openness humanity had shown to the Council. On one mission, they discovered something remarkable: the ruins of the civilization that had been monitoring Earth, that had spread the stories about humanity throughout the galaxy. The records were fragmented, but the message was clear. This ancient race had seen something in humanity, a potential to unite rather than divide. They had prepared the galaxy for humanity's arrival, planting seeds of legend that would make acceptance possible despite the fear. The biggest change came in military doctrine. Admiral Morrison had proposed something radical: a joint defense force where all species contributed according to their abilities. Humans would provide rapid response and evacuation capabilities. Zerians would handle heavy assault when needed. Zalathi would manage intelligence and reconnaissance. Vorthans would maintain supply lines and logistics. The first test of this alliance came when pirates attacked a refugee convoy carrying survivors from a natural disaster. The response was swift and coordinated. Human ships folded space to arrive instantly. Zerion dreadnoughts provided overwhelming firepower. Zalathi scouts tracked the pirates to their base. Vorthan supply ships brought aid to the refugees. What would have been a tragedy became a demonstration of what cooperation could achieve. Not everything was smooth. There were misunderstandings and conflicts. Some humans couldn't adjust to alien customs. Some aliens resented human influence. A group of Zerion traditionalists argued that humanity was weakening their warrior culture. A faction of Yutani worried that human protection would make them even more defenseless. These problems were addressed openly in the Council. Ambassador Nicole Gray worked tirelessly to mediate disputes and find compromises. She established the Cultural Exchange Program, where members of each species could live with another species for extended periods. The program had its awkward moments, like when human visitors to the methane-breathing Gaspers forgot they needed environmental suits, or when Thraxian visitors to Earth were terrified by rain. But for every failure, there were 10 successes. A human teacher named John Baker established the first truly integrated school on Station Prime. Children from different species learned together, played together, grew up seeing diversity as normal. A Zalathi engineer named Vexitar and a human programmer named Alice Green developed a new computer system that combined human creativity with Zalathi logic, revolutionizing artificial intelligence. The vote for humanity's full membership in the UI Council was scheduled for the anniversary of First Contact. In the months leading up to it, every member species had to decide what humanity meant for their future. The debates were intense, but respectful. Even those who had doubts couldn't deny the positive changes humanity had brought. High Chancellor Zelok, ancient and wise, gave the final speech before the vote. He had lived for 600 cycles, had seen the rise and fall of empires, had witnessed wars that devastated entire sectors. But in all that time, he had never seen anything like humanity's impact on the galaxy. He spoke of how humans saw potential where others saw problems, how they found friends where others found enemies, how they chose to protect when they could have conquered, how they shared when they could have hoarded, how they included when they could have isolated. The humans weren't perfect, he said, but they brought something the galaxy desperately needed: hope. The vote was unanimous. Every single member species voted to grant humanity full membership with a permanent seat on the Security Council. As Ambassador Gray signed the accession treaty, she announced humanity's first gift to their new allies: 12 garden worlds that human explorers had discovered but chosen not to colonize. These worlds would be given to species that needed new homes, free of any conditions or requirements. The ceremony was broadcast to every corner of known space. On Earth, billions watched as their representatives officially joined the galactic community. On colony worlds, humans celebrated with their alien neighbors. On Station Prime, the party lasted for 3 days and included traditions from every member species. As the celebration continued, Admiral Morrison stood with Commander Chen on the observation deck of the Defiance. They watched the stars, each point of light representing a world now connected to humanity. Earth was invisible from here, just one star among billions. But humanity had found its place among them. Children played in the parks of Station Prime, human and alien together, inventing games that no single species could have imagined. In the markets, traders exchanged goods and stories with equal enthusiasm. In the laboratories, scientists pushed the boundaries of what was possible. In the council chambers, diplomats worked to build a future where all species could thrive. The Age of Legends had ended. The age of humanity had begun. But more than that, an age of unity had dawned. The galaxy had learned that differences didn't have to mean division, that the unknown didn't have to be feared, that sometimes the best thing that could happen was the arrival of something completely unexpected. The human fleet took up positions throughout council space, not as occupiers, but as guardians. Their message, broadcast in every language to every world, was simple and powerful: we're here to help, and they meant it. They always had. That was what made them human. That was